Well, your band, do you want to talk a little bit about it? I remember we were talking about one of the guys that looked super young. I was like, wow, and they've got to be amazing musicians to play with you. I really would imagine that you're very.
Well, there've been 28 different members of Jethro Tull over the years, and you could take any group of 4 or 5 of those, and they would all have their special talent, their special skill, their special way of playing. But I think the guys that I work with at the moment, they have to play all of this repertoire, old, new, and everything in between. So they've got to be pretty sharp. They've got to know a lot about music intrinsically. They've got to have a good musical education to understand the different nuances, the different stylistic components of the music. So I think it's probably true to say that these guys are really all-rounders, although they have their own natural thing that they come from. In the case of one of them, it's classical music, and a couple of them are kind of jazz musicians. One of them is essentially rock with a bit of flamenco and whatever else classical music in his background. And they all have their different place that they came from, but they've expanded while they were quite young into learning a lot about music generally. And because the other guys over the years, and many of them were like me, just self-taught, and they can play what they can play. But if you ask them to play something outside their comfort zone, they could be struggling. And so these days, with such a huge repertoire, we have to keep dipping into. I do feel working with this particular group has been very rewarding during the last 10 years or whatever these folks have been playing with me. And, next year, next month, some of them might say, you know what, been great working with you, but I'm going to move on. And in a way, I'd be disappointed if some of them don't, because you don't want to spend your life working with an old-timer like me.
Please.
No, but it's true. I've said this to lots of people I've played with in the past. Take what you can from this experience, but don't get locked into it, because you've got the rest of your life. I mean, I'm nearly done. I've got a few years left in me, hopefully, but you've got a whole lifetime ahead of you as a musician. Don't get caught up with just doing one thing that you get locked into, because you can't possibly know when you're only in your 20s what you might be doing in your 40s or your 50s, or like me in your 60s. So don't get locked down by repetition and working with the same people and the same musical material all the time. Don't do that too early on in your life.
A really quick thing I have to say to you is that I laughed when I heard you say that that as a young guy, everybody wants to play guitar, and that should be, but then there was Eric Clapton, and you thought, there's no way I could be better than he was. So how many guys do you think put down the flute and went, can't do it because of you?
Well, I expect there are some people who would find it daunting, not because necessarily they think they can't play as well as me or better than me, but it's just when if you're a big fish in a small pool, and if you're playing flute in the context of rock music, there's not going to be much competition. So if you step up to be another rock flute player, you're going to suffer endless comparison with me, at least as long as I'm alive.
That's
and possibly for a little while after I'm not. And that's a thankless task, to try and make your way through life, always being compared to this guy standing on one leg playing the flute and running around. That's just who would want that job? So no, I think probably the reason I would put people off is because they know that as long as I'm still alive and kicking, it's not going to be a great thing to spend your musical career just being compared to somebody else that is kind of already there and been there for a while. So now my advice, if you want to learn to play music, is start off from the perspective of being an amateur, from the Latin root, amo, to love. And you play because you love music, not because you think you're going to make a pile of money out of it. And as I try to point out to people, for at least 150 days in the year, I am an amateur musician, because I'm just picking up my flute or my guitar and playing it for fun. Nobody paying me when I'm sitting at home, and I just decide to go and, as I do almost every day I'm at home, I go and spend an hour or so just playing for fun. I am an amateur musician. I know what it's like. But if you set out to be a happy amateur, and you get lucky, and somebody does pay you for doing what you do, that's an added bonus. But don't go into music because you want to make a ton of money, because you won't. Whether you're a rock flute player or whether you're the flute player in the Atlanta Symphony, you're not going to make a huge amount of money if you don't get incredibly lucky. Like James Galway got incredibly lucky, the classical flautist. He's done amazingly well, but he is just one of the very many flute players who started off on the road working with the Berlin Philharmonic with von Karajan and just happened to be the right guy at the right place to get a solo career and become the classical flautist of modern times. I just happened to pick up the flute and do a bit of a jig here and there, and I got lucky to be the rock flute player of all time. But you've got to be lucky, and for the rest of you who don't get lucky, do it because you love it. That's the only really good reason to ever play music, not because you're doing it as a public service or trying to put money in the bank. It's probably not going to happen. But don't let it put you off. The whole point is encouraging people to play music. Do it because it's fun, which it undoubtedly is. Unless, of course, you're the mother or father of a young drummer, in which case you have created a living hell in your domestic bliss.
I was going to say my parents wouldn't let me play the drums.
No, but we wouldn't let my son play the drums either. We waited till he left home before
Oh, that's great.
Before I encouraged him to be a drummer.
Yeah, he backs you from time to time. I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, good to talk to you.
You are awesome, Ian. Thank you
thanks
so
very much.
much.